So can a man respect a woman if he lacks this? Well, we're going to dive into this conversation. I've got an expert when it comes to empathy who helps corporations out. April Bell is in the house. So we're going to talk about respect, empathy, and we're going to go down a lot of rabbit holes. So welcome, April.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here. You make me happy.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Is that empathy? We'll find out. So, we got really quickly, and I don't want to spend a lot of time, but just give us the Cliff Note version of what you do so everyone has some context here.
Sure. I coach corporate executives on empathy building skills and also train workshops for leaders so they can bridge gaps between each other.
Okay. So what is empathy?
We were just talking about this, so I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
A lot of people get mixed up between empathy and sympathy. I like to think of empathy as an energy, like music. What kind of music do you listen to?
I'm an 80s fan.
Yes. So when you experience great music and it kind of opens your heart and opens your mind in a way that wasn't before, I think that empathy does the same thing, because what it is doing is it's allowing others' emotions to come in without it actually impacting your own.
Okay.
Or it's allowing your own emotions to come through so that you can actually see and perceive them without it being completely damaging. A lot of times people think that emotions are needing to be suppressed.
Yeah.
And when we repress emotions, then a lot of times they come out very strong. However, with empathetic human beings, and when we are empathetic with ourselves, what happens is we're allowing something in without actually acting on it. We're just observing it.
So and by the way, for everyone who's watching, April and I have already discussed this. There might be moments where I will interrupt her. I will let her know I'm interrupting her. For all of those that get bent out of shape that I might interrupt, just know we already have this agreement going forward, and she appreciated it. Okay. So it's interesting when we were chatting right before this, and I want to get to the title of this video in a moment. I was sharing how I once stated in a video that empathy isn't just about feeling someone else's feelings. It's really about feeling your own feelings, and more so even identifying what you might be feeling. That is a sort of empathy, is what I said in the video. And I said that out loud to you, and you go, yes, that's right. And I'm like, I didn't know I was right.
It's so funny because a lot of the work that I do is all around extracting people's emotions so that they can just be with them.
Okay.
And I actually, about 5 years ago, when I started doing self-empathy, like trying to learn what was I feeling, I had a hard time even understanding what was going on inside of me. So what I think is interesting about what you're saying around self-empathy is a lot like self-love. It's a lot like I thought you might appreciate that.
Yeah.
Empathy actually is a form of love, right? It's like appreciating what is there without trying to control it. And the reason why people mix up sympathy and empathy is because a lot of times when we're sympathizing with someone, we tend to do that because we care about them and we have compassion about them. And then therefore, sometimes we try to control what we think that they need to be doing. Whereas empathy is literally this space of sitting back and almost always starting with the question or the idea of, I wonder, I wonder what's going on. I wonder what's happening. If you're talking about self-empathy, that's, I wonder what I'm actually feeling right now, because I'm thinking a lot of things I don't like. So what am I feeling?
So let me jump in for a second, because I've said habitually on videos, women tend to perceive themselves as being very empathetic, that they're connected with their emotions. And I've said in videos, while women might believe, women have a propensity to vomit their emotions and their feelings, but they don't necessarily really know how to articulate their emotions and feelings in a way that's seen, heard, and understood. Now, that might sound kind of combative or misogynistic of some sort that I said that, but I'm saying that because I believe most human beings don't really know how to really identify their feelings. And here's a list of feelings, I mean, and I've observed this in my coaching practice habitually. One of the challenges have, just because you might, and again, that's the graphic is the vomit, but to really identify your feelings and then articulate it in a way is an art form. I mean, it's a skill. It's something that we must learn, at least the way I've observed it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think it's a process. So I like processes.
Okay.
And I think that the process to get to a place where you can speak your emotions with truth instead of emotion is by first becoming able to listen and then reflect and then aware of, and then knowledge of. And through those layers, wisdom actually comes into play. And when you have wisdom speaking to emotions, then what happens is you're able to do it from a place of groundedness and centeredness.
Okay.
Versus when you're talking about like vomiting or, exploding with emotion, that process is basically cut short. It doesn't happen. You experience it in such intensity or velocity, and then it just needs to get out. The difference between emotion and feeling is emotion is just the sensory processing that's going on in your body, whereas feelings are the actual articulation of what that emotion is.
But ding, 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 ding. I'm ringing a bell right now in my head. I had like a severe aha moment because in my mind, I guess I put the two together in the sense of emotion and feelings. But feelings is the emotion is the raw energy. That makes total sense to me. And the feelings are the articulation of what you're experiencing. And I suspect, as I said earlier, you might be feeling your feelings. Okay, but can you actually express it to someone else? So I want to shift gears for a moment and come back to our title because I want to be in authenticity about this title. That says, can a man respect a woman if he lacks this? And we're talking about empathy. When a human being, whether it's a man or woman, is, let's just say, stifled in their empathy, because I suspect we all, even, I don't know if the evilest person on the planet does, but I think most people have some level of empathy. What causes someone to lack empathy in the dating process that causes us to disrespect people?
It's the same thing that happens when we lack empathy for anything. It's because we have a very, very clear program belief in our mind about what is truth. And our neural pathways are not able to actually adjust so we can actually learn more about what about what could be true.
Okay.
And so let's just take dating for example.
Yeah.
I mean, I have learned over the years how empathetic men are. And I've learned in the last 5 years specifically more than I ever thought I would about the characteristics that, because of the way they were raised differently than females, it almost lends them to more empathy. Now, I know that's a very controversial subject.
Whoa. I'm going to have to put the brakes on you here. Let continue, please. I said that in
I say that it's controversial because for me, I've had to go through a lot of paradigm and perspective shift and empathy from internally in order to even believe that statement to be true. And it started because about 4 or 5 years ago, I was doing this mastermind with female executives, and it was
Okay.
was that 4 years ago when COVID hit? Yeah. So
Yeah.
we were doing that instead of some of the stuff that I was typically doing. And in that process of like this empathy building process in order for people to move into their purpose, these women kept telling me this is not just for women, it's for men. And I'm like, no, this is a female subject. I don't think this is a male subject. So
Okay.
anyway, they had me do an empathy research, and I did a call out to my database, and my database has probably like 20% of executive level men, and
Okay.
the rest are female. I had I over-indexed with the number of males who wanted to be a part of the research on empathy, and it was mind-blowing to me. So then I got really curious, like, why are some men so interested in this subject? And so I do think that we believe that men are non-empathetic because of the way that we think empathy plays out.
Okay.
Whereas so I don't want to keep going unless you.
No. Well, I think, what popped in my head, and I just wrote down the word, men often have been so conditioned, certainly us baby boomer men or the Gen X men. I think it's different for the younger generation. We have been so taught to stuff our emotions and to be stoic in the face of moments where it might require to emote. So I think to some degree, it's been conditioned out of us. But I have this perception that is probably true the higher a man's testosterone is. What happens to men as they age is testosterone levels drop and estrogen levels increase. And I do believe at some point, this is what I think midlife crisis is kind of can be a catalyst for this, is we become more attuned to our emotions and our feelings. And we are actually for some men, not all, but we're thirsty to we want to get a handle on this. We want to get, when I say the word handle, I don't mean it's out of control. I just mean getting some clarity on this. And I do believe there's a significant percentage of men who want to be more empathetic, as we say, because I believe that when we really can master our emotions and self-regulate at a higher level than stuffing it down, we actually experience more joy in our lives. I mean, that's what I've observed for my own life.
Yes. And I agree with you, what you're saying around a lot of men who especially are in this like Gen X maybe realm.
Yeah.
I believe that a lot of what I'm seeing is this desire and curiosity to learn more about it, which by the way, curiosity is one of the like 4 amplifiers that I talk about in terms of becoming more empathetic. But I think that where men excel when it comes to empathy is in the idea of detachment. And so a lot of times women believe they are being empathetic because what they believe to be true is about someone's feelings kind of supersedes what someone's actually saying. What I've seen is men who kind of stay detached and really try to understand from a headspace with their heart really open. I find that to be a very sweet spot for finding empathetic men. And it's been interesting because I've found in the last few years as I've begun coaching and talking to more men who are struggling in maybe their culture and their organization, or interpersonal issues with their employees, that they are more empathetic than they think they are. What they struggle with, though, the most is becoming curious about things that they're not trying to problem solve. So I feel like the difference is when a man's trying to problem solve something and he can't fix it in the old style with the old systems and the old checklist,
Yeah.
then eventually he will find some way to problem solve a different way. And that's where he might go out and look for other ways of doing things, which is why I have a business. You know, I get called in when there's not a way to problem solve in the old style of doing business. And instead they need innovative thinking. They need collaboration. They need people to feel with each other and be in each other's truth. There's a behavior therapy called dialectic behavior therapy, which speaks to this.
Yeah.
And that is where two opposing truths can be true, right? And so usually empathy allows those two truths to kind of coexist and then find kind of this middle, better way to problem solve.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was watching I'm going off on a tangent here for a second, but it relates to problems. I was watching a debate of two highly intellectual people, and the moderator had each person do the steel man argument for the other person. In other words, you have to now, after this person has given their argument, the other person now has to recite why that person's argument is correct.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting about that is, if imagine using this in interpersonal relationships, you have a conflict, you have two different points of view, you're very steadfast in your point of view, but now you have to interject. Well, now you have to recite why that person's point of view is right.
Yes. And what you just spoke of is exactly that first step in this process is active listening.
Yes.
So the thing that cuts us off from closer connection is a lack of active listening. Yes. Listening to what's actually true for the other person without interjecting your own thoughts, feelings, et cetera, into it. And I love the way that you talked about that.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. So I want to, for everyone, I want to share a quick story that happened prior to our conversation, which I shared with April. And by the way, April, probably in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to start taking questions from the group. So I just want to give you a heads up on that. So speaking of empathy, or maybe it wasn't empathy, I have a very dear friend. I've known her for 19 years. Interesting enough, we had a few dates we met on Match.com, or actually Yahoo Personals, had a few dates, didn't turn into a love connection, but we've developed a friendship. Actually, you have two women like that in my life. And her relationship ended recently, and she's back out in the dating marketplace. And she found herself engaged with a man who, after hearing enough about this dialogue, I'm like, look, he's either a scam artist or he's a married man. I mean, all the red
flags.
Yeah, the red flags were like one after another. Like she was about to hit the iceberg in Titanic, but she wasn't willing to let go. She was doubling down. The more I was giving her suggesting cutting it off, she was doubling down. And I mean, the clues were there. He travels a lot. I mean, like just one thing after another. Oh, he wouldn't give out his last name. I mean, just one thing after another. And I called her up. I was calling her up and I said, look, I need your children's telephone number so I can call them so they can knock some sense into you. Like and this totally worked me up. I mean, I was worked up in a frenzy because I'm protective of my friend, and I'm partially because I also do this for a living. But it was causing me emotional distress at the same time. So is that empathy?
Do you think it was?
Well, I mean, I could accept that I was just being completely irrational, but no, I felt I was being very protective. Mm-hmm. So, but is protectiveness a form of empathy? Maybe that's more my question.
Mm-hmm. I love the question because I think this goes back to what I've been saying about sympathy versus empathy.
Yeah.
And can I ask you another question? Because I'm curious. Sure. What would it mean to you, or what would it mean about you for her to carry on the way that she is and not listen to you?
What would it mean about me? Well, I mean, I guess I could take it down a rabbit hole and say I'm not effectively communicating what like, in other words, I mean, I could take it almost to the level, I'm not a good coach if I can't convince someone who's a friend to
Mhm.
get off this train,
Mhm.
I could go down that road. I'm aware enough to know that this thing called chemistry is a drug similar to crack cocaine. So I know I don't have that much power over another human being when they're literally addicted to crack.
Mhm.
And
And
that's what she was experiencing in my mind.
yes, and why, besides your care for her, is it so important for you?
You know, I thought about that literally when I was preparing for this. I must have done some real harm in a past life. And I know I'm being very
I love
sincere
it.
here. I suspect I'm being paid back on some level because of some harm I've done in the past. A bit, maybe it could be 3 past lives ago or something generational, like it's a generational curse. And I'm here to be like, I'm a gigantic mouthpiece for shaking up, consciousness through my platform
Mhm.
because I recognize that I lived a very unconscious life for a very long time. So my style is bombastic, it's humorous, it's kind of flamboyant at times. I mean, I could think of a bunch of different words. But I'm radically passionate about helping
Yes.
and maybe to reduce suffering in some way.
So, may I speak about what I make up in my mind about the situation?
Sure. By the
So,
way, I appreciate you asked permission.
yes, yes. Well, what comes up for me is that when people are really passionate about something or someone or an endeavor or a subject or something they know a lot about,
Yeah.
that is the most difficult time, place, people to be empathetic with. And the reason is
Right.
because
I'm confused. Say that one more time. I apologize. I didn't
Mhm.
understand what that meant. So it's a very difficult time to be empathetic when
We
what?
care. When we care, when
Oh,
we're
when we care.
passionate,
Yeah.
when we know the answer, when we care about the person and we have passion about it, it is most difficult to be empathetic because what empathy requires is a place of detachment from outcome and a place of surrender and curiosity in order to discover what is actually the other truth going on without
Oh, fuck
judgment.
that. I want to get angry at her. I want to admonish her. Gosh, why can't I
I
just
asked
give tough
permission.
love?
I asked permission before I gave you my thoughts.
Yeah. I hope you can tell there's a little bit of levity in me. By the way, I accept what you just said as being true. It's hard for me to, I would venture to say there's a tiny bit of righteousness in me too. I mean, I'm aware enough of my foibles, if you will,
I can
that
see that about you.
yeah, I'm almost obnoxiously introspective. To the point of it's detrimental to my own well-being. But I accept
Yeah.
that this is. But I'm also doing this because I'm a laboratory. I use my life as a laboratory
Yep.
as a teacher. So because coming back to empathy, if I know what it feels like I had a significant relationship end a year ago, and it was gut-wrenchingly painful. Now,
Mm.
I don't mean it like I was outwardly painful, but I recognize it hurt deeply inside. And I was probably in shock for 6 months that I didn't even have that many emotions around it. And then I
Interesting.
gasped, pardon me?
I said, that's interesting. I wonder why.
Yeah, well, because I was spiritually bypassing it by going straight to gratitude
Got
and going
it.
straight to acceptance, that I bypassed the anger pain of love.
Yes. Yes. That is exactly, you're speaking exactly to the problem with people miss defining empathy. Like empathy is just the allowing of emotions to rise so that you can have an understanding of what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And in doing so, those emotions can inform decision making and create possibility because it creates perspective shift if you can see emotion without being in it. So what I hear about your story that's going on now with your friend is that you're actually in her emotion with you. That's called emotional contagion. And so it's because she's wrapped up in something and
Yeah.
then you're wrapped up in it. So pulling away, and in order for it to really become clear with a spirit of curiosity what's going on with her, I think that actually will allow some things to come through for her, perhaps, and maybe even for you. And I know you didn't hire.
Well,
I'm not trying to coach you, but it just came up for me.
Well, no. Well, first off, thank you so much for your perspective. And I'm aware of, I'm on twofold. I'm aware of something. I want to go back to the relationship.
Yeah.
By actually experiencing all these different emotions and feelings and going through this experience, I believe now I have a better understanding of what so many of my clients go through, that I actually do believe I'm more empathetic in this sense. And I'm actually working on tools to help people navigate these experiences through what I teach in my coaching is radical discernment and such.
Yes.
But most importantly, the pain is a reminder to hold steadfast in your standards, because when you compromise your standards, the end result is like, look, it's like, I see the pretty fire, let me touch it. Well, I get now, don't touch fire. With respect to my friend, again, I feel like I'm experiencing these situations so I can actually come at this more from an empathetic place, from a coaching perspective.
And one of the things I appreciate about you when I listen to how you speak of women needing self-love in order to date better is because I believe that the reason empathy and respect are so in line with each other is because empathy actually allows one to be what they are and think what they think and feel how they feel without trying to change it. And I believe that's very closely related to how respect works. That when you respect someone, when you act with respect, then what happens is you're just allowing that person to be who they are, the way they are. And as another human to human, it's okay. And that's why I feel that this idea of respect is so important, because when a man has respect in his nature, when he acts with respect, when he acts with integrity, when he acts in a way that is with truth and honesty, you are going to, as a woman, feel safe, and you are going to be able to blossom with your own self-love. But without that, and you're in a space where you're trying to love on yourself as a woman, and you're showing up with men who are not giving you respect, then it's basically a downward cycle of allowing someone else to control your emotions rather than being in them yourself.
Okay, so I'm in 1,000% agreement, and I'm aware that the dating process is a bit self-centric. Okay, it's oftentimes people approach it not what I can give, but what I can get. I mean, it's true for men and women alike. It's like, I have an agenda, I want to get something out of this experience. And I believe that particularly for men, the biological drive to be physically intimate with a woman is like the shark's eyes rolling back in the head. You know, I mean, it disconnects that respect, you know, that virtue, respect receptor from the brain. And I mean, and I speak from personal experience because I'd like to think I treat people with respect, but I'm going to tell you that drive the shit that can come out of my mouth, or has come out of my mouth, I'll say it past tense. I don't think I've done it in recent history. But I'm like, I was out of integrity. I was out of respect. I mean, I didn't respect the other person because I had an agenda that was masked in beautiful love bombing and poetic conversation. And plus, I speak chick, so I'm actually the most dangerous person on the planet because I can actually articulate my emotions and my feelings. But I will tell you that that's how powerful the biological drive, that it disconnects us from respect.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that, because what came up for me as you were describing it is that something I believe to be very true, that all men are capable of respect and all men are capable of disrespect. Just the same as all women are capable of being bitches and capable of being angels. And so I'm curious, what causes you to respect a woman enough to cut off that drive and move through on the other side of it? That's what I want to know from you.
I hypothesized this about a decade ago. If we perceive the woman to be virtuous, and I don't know the true definition of virtue, so I may want to Google it in a second.
What's your definition of it?
Pardon me?
What's your definition of it? Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm reluctant to say it because it's not even close. I'll just give you my perception of it. Okay. When we value this person as like the way I guess I would value my sister or my daughter in a sense, like a sense of purity. Yes. When we actually see that person with virtue, we will actually disconnect that like that biological drive and treat that person with respect.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I remember specifically, I had a date with a woman. This was 15 plus years ago. And I can't tell you what made me think of her as virtuous. I mean, I wish I could teach it so I could. It was just a feeling. And I didn't attack. And I mean that in a levity way. You know, in other words, I wasn't on the hunt. That might be a better way to put it.
Because you activated your heart. Something in your heart connected you, you know, from your groin to your head. You know, there's like an integration. Yeah. Right. Which is what I believe empathy does is. And the reason why it's so important for women to have self-empathy is because if a woman knows what's in her heart and she can articulate that clearly, then what it allows is a man to hear it. And then he could potentially accept it, want to have more of that, think about it versus just being, going straight for body only. And so that's what came up for me as you were talking about that.
So someone just wrote, virtue is a quality of being morally good. I mean, to some degree, I don't know how to teach what I experienced, but I'm just very aware. And by the way, this has happened more than once. So this isn't but I'm also aware that biological drive, I mean, especially if they're engaging with me and there's a kind of an energy going between us. It's not that hard to, for lack of I don't want to say cross a line because a boundary is a boundary, but to certainly do my best to convince a person for physical intimacy. And then it's up to them to decide if that's what they want to engage in. So really quickly, April, I want to open it up to questions. So folks, if you have a question for us, write the word question in the chat box, or you and then post the question there after. Or you can purchase a super sticker, super chat. All the monies from the super sticker, there's a little $sign in the chat box. All the monies from the super sticker, super chat goes to a scholarship fund in the name of my son, Connor Aslays, my son who passed away over 6 years ago. In his honor, we donate to causes like the Hoffman Process, Insight Institute, Insight Seminars, I should say, and also scholarships to coaching as well. So if you have a question for April and I, please post it in the chat box. So, so coming back to empathy, all right, I have a confession, April. I can't stand people who will comment and say, I'm an empath. I mean, it just bugs the fuck out of me. And it's like, like, if you are, then why do you have to announce it? Like, I don't like that they announce it. It's almost kind of like this badge of honor, this I'm better than you. That's how it feels to me. So coach me through this experience and tell me what, by the way, do I have any validity in it?
This is why I think you're funny. Is because you have an authenticity about you that's quite charming, and I think that I understand why so many people appreciate you. I wonder why that bothers you so much. Like how? Here's another question. How do you identify yourself? Like when you speak to like the essence of who you are, how would you say that you would identify yourself?
Well, I'm going to go back. Well, I want to rewind to part of what you said. Why does that bother me? I don't like the announcement as if it's it's a way I feel when someone says they have to over announce that I'm empathetic, that it almost makes them righteous or they're better than you. That's how it feels to me when someone has to announce it. Like in my mind, you don't need to announce it. You just are it.
Yes.
And then what was the second part? So I wanted to explain.
Yeah, I was just wondering, and here's why I asked the question is because what I make up is that people who talk about being empaths, it's likely because they are highly sensitive, and what that means is they probably take in a lot of people's emotional energy on a consistent basis. I mean, I do. I would probably identify as an empath because I'm constantly taking in emotional energy. What happens for empaths when they kind of learn the word is it's like learning you have ADHD or learning you have, a learning style difference or a vision. It's like you almost understand there's kind of a difference in you that creates some of the emotional energy that you yourself are kind of putting out into the world. And so people who are moving through understanding that likely are kind of going through some healing and wanting to express themselves, and I don't blame you for for it bothering you, but it made me wonder, like, has there ever been a time when you realized there was something about yourself? Like, I think I've heard you mention before that you are not an alpha male. You're more of like you have more feminine qualities. Like there's like a recognition or an acknowledgement about that you.
Well, I want to address that because that's a trigger for me. So I don't consider myself an alpha male, but I don't consider myself a beta male either. I mean, I don't even like the connotations. I don't like the labels. Maybe I just don't like labels. Like what was it, Kierkegaard, or who said it? Don't label me because you negate me. In other words, if you have to announce it, then you it's like I'm smart. Like that would, to me, then when I hear someone say I'm empath, it's like I'm saying I'm smart. Like, you don't need to say it. Okay. Just be it. So that's how I feel about that. Like, I don't like masculine and feminine energy rhetoric because it has a gigantic connotation associated with it. So the fact that I have what's considered by some sort of societal expectation, I have a capacity to emote and feel and articulate and all those things. The fact that it's characterized as feminine, well, I'm a guy. Why does it have to be characterized as feminine? It just is.
I love that about you.
We don't need to label maybe I just have issues with labels.
Yes, I think that's exactly what it is. And
by the way, but I do like being a boyfriend or girlfriend to somebody, so I like that label.
Okay. Wait. Now what? Say that again.
I do like being a boyfriend and or having a girlfriend. I like that label. So I don't want to say that I hate all labels.
Right. Well, you don't like labels that are putting you in a category or putting someone in a category as if it defines them. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Which I say more power to you. I totally 100% agree that the more we label each other, the more difficulty we have in bridging gaps between us.
Yeah. And so, my part of my coaching, or my messaging might be a better way to put it, is I do believe our stereotypes, our socialization, our perceptions pigeonhole men and women practically against one another. What was interesting, I was getting a haircut today, and I was talking to and the gals who work there were talking about how women can be radically cruel to one another. They lack camaraderie for one another. And she was referencing how men, and she was talking about competition. And I said to her, I go, men can be very competitive with one another, but we do it in a camaraderie way.
Yes.
So because this is how we can get off on the competition. But and so I do recognize that there are behavioral differences between men and women. But I think what's more important in the dating conversation is let's throw out some of the traditional rhetoric. And coming back to what you said, how can we connect from a heart-centered level that has nothing to do with gender?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and what came up for me as you were talking about that is I think some of the traditional ways that women and men learned about what they need from each other is that women needed love and men needed respect. And I think what has changed in the modern world is that women actually need respect as well. And respect is usually derived from knowing who that person is. And likely what is missing is, for a lot of men, not stopping and waiting to see if they can actually know someone before judging them. And
I thought you were going to say have sex with them.
Yes, and that
Yeah.
right. Which to me, that goes back to your virtuous that you're talking about, and that's how respect is kept, is by knowing that if you want a man to be something other than a sex partner, waiting until that man cares about what you think and how you feel is a better idea in order to establish a mutually respectful, mutually empathetic relationship.
So, okay, we could go down a number of different rabbit holes. By the way, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but Dr. Pat Allen, I've heard her say this before. Women feel respected when they're cherished, and men feel cherished when they're respected. Whether and me is, I'd rather let's just respect and cherish each other, and let's do both in my mind. So oh man, I had this great thought and I just blanked on it because I went off on another subject.
It's okay. What came up for me when you were saying that is the word that we use a lot in the corporate world, but I think it could also work well in partnership, is engagement. When you have emotional engagement with, whether it's your customers, your consumers, with your teammates, with your employees, your management, when you have that emotional engagement, then you end up having relationship, right? It becomes something that is dynamic and that you show up again and again with.
Okay, so emotional engagement. I love this. So I want to get your perspective on a perspective I have. Men oftentimes, and again, I'm not trying to throw men under the bus, but I'm here to be that big brother and say, pay attention to these signals. When a man is expressing how you make him feel, okay? When he's expressing how you make him feel, that can feel like emotional connection. And so let me give you an example. Oh my God, April, you're the most beautiful woman on the planet. You're so amazing. You're wonderful. I could see us having, living together and getting married and blah, 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 blah. He's expressing how you make him feel. There's a difference versus actually sharing his feelings about you. In other words, how you make him feel is one thing, but how he feels about you is another thing. And oftentimes I notice this particularly with avoidant attachment style men and women, is they oftentimes are so repressed that they can't express how they feel about you. In the early stage, they can tell you how they're feeling when they're with you. Are you tracking where I'm going? Because
Yes.
I feel like I'm doing want.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
Well, is the question or is the thought that there's two different ways to describe feelings and from a man's perspective. One is how I feel about you, and then just how I'm feeling, period.
Yes. It's, in other words, the feelings he's experiencing when you're with you certainly can sound like music to a woman's ears because he's being emotive.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a big difference when you're coming back to that virtuous person. How did I feel about her? I felt like she was a quality person. I felt she was, virtuous from a perspective of precious. I felt that she had integrity. I had all these feelings about her that made me put her as a virtuous category. I wasn't focused on my feelings from a physiological perspective. I was, there's a big difference. And I think this is such a confusing thing for women in those early stages of dating, because we're amped up on chemicals like testosterone and estrogen and dopamine and oxytocin. It's a chemical cocktail to make us mate.
Well, so what comes up for me really strong whenever you're saying that is when a woman knows how she's feeling when a guy is telling her his feelings. That's what matters. Okay. So what I mean by that is this goes back to the self-empathy that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Right? Like being aware of the emotions in your own body and what's triggering those. Because what you're talking about could be chemistry. Right? It could be sexual chemistry.
Yes.
So therefore, I'm feeling excited because my entire body's full of excitement, and this guy is giving me all of the things. Right? That is an awareness of what the body sensation is, and then there's all the other feelings that come along with being with that man that you almost have to track, like eating, or if you're doing a food journal or something like that.
Okay.
Because and it's true. Like one of the requirements on my list for dating is I feel good after every exchange with the man 8 out of 10 times. So whether that's a conversation, if it's a text, if it's, kissing, whatever it is, that feeling is consistent. Because what happens with chemistry related feelings is that you end up getting like a very irregular heartbeat, right? You've got push-pull dynamic going on. You may feel great one time and then you feel really horrible the next. And that's usually chemistry, and being aware of that chemistry versus like a consistent feeling of safety, security, partnership, respect. That's a completely different type of experience, that when a woman is understanding that about herself, then she allows discernment to come in on like, okay, is this only happening when we're sexually involved, when he's telling me something right before he kisses me, or is it happening when we're on the phone and I'm telling him about a bad day, right? Like those are two different.
If I had a bell right now, I'd go ding, 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 ding. That's so absolutely true. Well, like this friend I was sharing with you about earlier, she got amped up on the chemistry of what was happening, the chemical release that she was experiencing, that all discernment went out the window. And I almost liken it like the child is running the show and not the adult. So coming back to getting to know someone, I want to spend the balance of our time in this conversation because, first off, I want to acknowledge something about you, April.
Aww.
And I can only speak for myself, but I believe appreciative inquiry, in other words, curiosity, is an aphrodisiac to me. In other words, when someone is curious to ask me questions, but from a place of like going deeper than just the surface, like, you know, what kind of car do you drive or what do you do for a living? Okay. I mean, going into a more emotional or intellectual curiosity. I believe that the current dating environment, most humans are not very skilled at actually getting to know another human being at a deeper level than just the surface stuff.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts on that.
Okay, good.
This we keep going back to the same idea, and I believe so strongly in it. We are able to get curious about someone else when we know ourselves very well and we're willing to express who we are. So I believe that the way that we get close to someone is by revealing ourselves to them as fast as possible. So for example, you know, I know that I want a gentle giant, and I have an image of him as King Kong, like going up the Empire State Building with a woman underneath his
Ray.
large arm. And not that he needs to be physically strong and hairy, but the visual is there because I want a man who will elevate my daughter and I, and that cares about what I want. Okay, so when I know that, then that allows my inquiry to be very, very specific when I'm approaching the dating scene. So, for example, like today, I had 2 men who came upon my online app, and I decided, and I've been doing this for about a month now, just to see what happens. I've decided, let me, as quickly as possible, tell that man, something that I need, something that I want him to do, and just see how he reacts. So the request that I've been asking is something like, so glad that you messaged me. Thank you. And what I need next is for you to email me at this email address so that we can set up a time to talk, because I would love to know more about X, whatever it is they said in their profile.
Okay.
And it's so fun to do that because you have all these different responses. And what I've learned is you get to learn who a man is if he's willing to learn about you.
Yes.
And if he's willing to ask questions about you or intrigued by you, or if he says, which is what happened with one of them, I'll give you what did he say? I'll give you a break because you've got a cute smile, but no, we're not going to do that. You're going to talk to me here.
Well, so I want to, is it okay if I respond to that?
Please.
So, because, and I struggle with what you shared, because on some level, getting on and by the way, I used to get on the telephone like immediately kind of thing. Like I'd want to do that. But I've also reached a point in my life where I'm being very selective on who I want to give my energy. So there's some questions I want answered before I ever take it to a telephone call. Like I want to know, you know, for me, how devoted are they in their personal development, self-help, and their spiritual life? Like that's a significant thing. I'm also seeking an empty nester because I'm in that space in my life. So like, because the profiles don't give you, they might give you some hints to this, but there's not enough. I also share that I do psychedelic journeys as part of a spiritual awakening for me. And so like, these are a few things I want to get out of the way before I get onto a telephone call. Like, I mean, I want to check a few of these boxes because the dating profile doesn't do that, or the dating profile actually does, but I don't know if they've read it enough to like pre-qualify it. So I know that I might want to build a little bit of rapport before it goes straight to a telephone call. That I'm just saying that if you had gotten that, I might have reacted like, hey, is it okay if we ask ourselves a few questions? I don't mind doing it via email, but I want to do these pre-qualifying before I get on a telephone call.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And actually, that's one of the reasons I appreciate you, is because that requires thoughtfulness, and it requires an empathetic response to do exactly what you just said, which is, I totally don't mind doing this, and this is what I need. And that's actually how you start engagement, is because you're both able to say what's needed and see how the other responds. I liked it.
take on. So can you read this question and tell me what your thought is?
Well, if I can get my glasses on.
I'll read it out loud for you, okay?
That you seem anxious?
Yeah, do I seem anxious? I'm like really, like I'm hyper and I'm excited and I'm like I love this conversation, but anxious doesn't feel like the feeling I'm feeling right now. So I'd be curious if you, the person I'm talking to, do I appear anxious to you?
So I don't actually see anxiety. I feel anxiety.
Okay.
And I sometimes have felt some anxiety flowing through my system during this call, but often I can't tell if that's mine or the other person's, to be honest with you. But I've also felt a lot of energy between us, and
Yeah.
I've felt a lot of what would be the word? Like uh responsiveness. Like not
Yes.
reactivity, but responsiveness.
Yes.
And I appreciate that about the conversation. So that's my thought.
So, well, thank you. And it's interesting. I want to go back to the dating conversation for a second. So, one of my frustrations is people that aren't curious. Like, I'm constantly curious. I'm like one question after another, after another, after another. And then I'm waiting for them to do, even if it's the exact same question, at least throw a question back at me. Like, at least give me something. And I've gotten to a point where I have no patience, partially because appreciative inquiry, curiosity is probably one of my highest values.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about curious about the world. I want someone who's curious about me. Now, I don't mean that from a self-centric perspective, but do you want to get to know me? Then ask me questions. And I hear this from women all the time. They're on dates with men and all they do is talk about themselves. So I get, but I'm telling you, women can be as equally poor at being curious. And I'm trying to vocalize this as an encouragement to, like, maybe people should just be asking questions of one another.
So are you saying that that you have women that you date that are not curious about you?
Oh God. I mean, well, let me reframe the word. When you say date, I have gone on a date. I will not date a woman unless they're curious. Like, they don't get a second date. They don't.
Yeah. That is surprising.
Unless I'm horny, and then they might, but then that my primal part takes over, and I'm not proud of that. I'm just aware that I can be, both elevated and down in the gutter at the same time.
And then you're like, don't be curious, just do it.
I'm just kidding. I'm being tongue in cheek.
No, I get it.
Because I'm very aware that there was a Jonathan years ago that operated that way, and I operate so differently today.
Yeah.
I think curiosity it's actually.
Is sorry, keep going.
Well, I believe I believe the humans that are most curious are probably the most introspective, self-aware, and they're doing real work on themselves. That's what I've observed, is those human beings that do that also tend to be more curious. So it's one of my vetting questions, because I really want to partner with someone who's like, I want someone who will do an autopsy on my brain with me every day with each other, and I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but to me, the introspective work is like the inner world is just as great as seeing the Taj Mahal or putting your finger on the Eiffel Tower in the photograph. Like, to me,
100.
the inner world is more fascinating to me than seeing sights and taking a photograph.
100%. And I think that curiosity is the key to empathy. And it's the one thing that I've seen that when people are able to bridge into a place of curiosity versus knowing and judging, they actually not only learn and grow, but they're able to engage in a much more authentic, connected way, the way they want to be.
So McCoy Hill Farm just wrote, curious as a cat, I can be dangerous to myself. You know, the phrase, curiosity killed the cat, right?
So have you read the book called Curiosity? Because they talk about that exact.
No, I'm now just made aware of it. So tell me what it says about curiosity.
So I've read 3 books about curiosity. It's my number 1 trait in my gentle giant that I'm wanting, and so I 100% agree with what you're saying. Part of the problem with curiosity, and especially with some people who know a lot and are very brilliant, is that knowledge, once you have a lot of it, it almost hinders you, because you almost by definition become less curious. So if you want to breed curiosity, learning how to see yourself as like a beginner is important. But the reason Curiosity Killed the Cat is such a problem is because that metaphor actually speaks to or speaks against curiosity. So this book talks about different forms of curiosity. So there's curiosity that takes you down kind of darker roads, right? But then there's another kind of empowered curiosity that takes you down a road to more growth and development, because it allows more neural pathways to begin unforming from what they're used to doing, and then creating new pathways. So I think it's interesting that you said that, because that phrase alone is what this guy in this book describes as being one of the problems, is that we have a built-in subconscious belief that curiosity actually is a problem.
Well, it's interesting because Trista just wrote, can being curious feel intrusive to some people? And I've observed, yes. In other words, when I get curious with someone, and usually I find they tend to be emotionally closed off. So, I mean, that's just been my observation. Or I don't like labeling low EQ, but I would just say a lower EQ, because I think people of higher EQ have they just naturally are curious. April, I feel like we could go on for another hour, but I want to keep it to the hour that we agreed on.
What time is it? I don't even know what time it is. We are? Oh, heavens.
Yeah. This has been an absolute fun conversation, and talking about empathy, particularly we were talking about men, but this really relates to men and women alike. Is empathy, we'll end on this question. Is empathy something you can learn?
You can learn how to amplify your empathy. Empathy is something we already have. Okay. And you can learn how. And actually, in my book, the last section of it talks how you amplify it. Okay, here it is. Okay.
By the way, everybody, April has a book called, what is the book, April?
The Fire Starter, Igniting Innovation with Empathy.
Okay, hold the book up again for everyone. Center it that way. Okay, everyone, I will be posting a link to April's website below in the first comment and in the show notes section. So I want you to check out go on to her website. Is there your book on Amazon?
Yes.
Go to Amazon, get her book. Highly recommend it. I would connect with April if you want some perspective, or check out her site. I'm sure you've got a lot there. You probably have a free gift if anyone wants to follow you and that sort of thing. I forget, do you have a YouTube channel?
I don't.
Well, shame on you.
I know.
One. Please forgive me. I don't mean to shame you.
See, that was empathetic.
Yeah. Was that empathetic?
Yeah, but I have to show you something really quickly before we get off.
Sure.
Look at the other book I'm reading right now. You're going to laugh at this.
No. Okay. Pull it back a little. No, the other way. The Healed Empath. Interesting. Highly sensitive people.
Yeah. So I've been reading about this for the same reason, because it kind of gets on my nerves too, with the way people talk about empaths. So I'm like, what is that? And I wanted to end with that because I thought.
We see, I'm not the only one. And again, I just don't like the way some people have to announce it at all. You don't need to tell me.
I know.
Now, I recognize now some people, well, I'm going to go down another rabbit hole before we log off.
Okay.
An HSP, a highly sensitive person, I believe, is someone who's sensitive to their environment. I've noticed, April, as I've gotten older, I've become more sensitive to my environment. In other words, just like sounds and things, even a sound bath I did recently, I'm like, whoa, that really hit me. I think there's a difference between a highly sensitive person versus an empath, or are they one and the same?
I think they're very similar. And I also think you've done
Okay.
a lot of healing and awareness, which probably lets more energy in for you.
Yeah, I've certainly been on a crash course of learning, and I recognize that all of these experiences is because I'm so radically passionate about this subject matter, you know, dating, mating, and relating, human behavior, self-love, all this stuff. It's like I'm a junkie for it. But I feel like I'm on an accelerated learning path. So I'm getting all of these feelings, or I'm experiencing all these emotions and feelings so I can be more, you know, be a better coach, I hope.
You're doing amazing work in this world. And I just want to
Oh,
honor you for that and say thank you. And I'm
well,
very grateful that you allowed me to be here with you today. It
well,
was an
thank
honor.
you. Well, thanks for reaching out to me. I know when I shut off, we'll talk for a little bit. Everyone, please check out April Bell. She's listed below. Folks, I hope you found value in this conversation. If you did, please hit that like button. Please share this video. Please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell. And if I didn't already say it earlier, please post a comment below. I'd like to hear your thoughts. I'm going to wrap up this video, April, by reaching into the camera and giving you a big, gigantic Jonathan Bear hug, if I have your permission.
I'll give you one back.
Okay, thank you. I receive it well. I want to thank McCoy Hill, Carrie, Billy Olt, Sabrina, Marianne. Oh, I want to give Natural Leah some props for giving us a $10 super sticker. Thank you. Your channel is changing my life for the better. I'm one of those virtuous people. Thank you, Jonathan April, for a superb live stream. Thank you so much. Thanks, Debbie and Ray of Sunshine and Mystic Tarot Card Cafe and everyone who supports me. I'm sending you all a big, gigantic Jonathan Bear hug. Wishing you all a super duper wonderful evening. Bye now. Bye-bye. Bye.